Welcome to the Timbo Talks podcast, a weekly show about work and play and everything in between. I'm your host, Timbo. This week I'd like to talk about a world that sits alongside our world, the human world, but is completely invisible to us. But nevertheless, it's there and its influence can be felt. I'm talking about the fungal kingdom. Here's a fun fact. Every day, every person on the planet inhales at least 1,000 fungal spores. So, as you're listening to my voice come through your speaker, fungal spores are probably going up your nose or down your throat. It's a pleasant thought, isn't it? The fungal kingdom can be dangerous. There are fungal infections that medicine really struggles to combat. And that's because antifungal medications that I learnt today, they're hard to design because fungi and humans are similar at the cellular level. So it's challenging to create a drug that can kill them, the fungal infections from the fungal kingdom, without killing us too. Always thought when you looked at a mushroom, I always got the sense that the cap and the stem, it was almost like I'm looking at another being or another person. It's fascinating that we're similar at the cellular level. The fungal kingdom can wreak havoc on other parts of nature too, not just humans. Something I learned earlier today is the whole reason that most of the world's coffee production is in Central and South America is because of a fungus-like organism that infected coffee plants in all of South Asia in the 1870s. It was known as coffee leaf rust, and because it wiped out all the coffee growing regions there at the time in South Asia, India and Sri Lanka, coffee production had to shift to Central and South America. So that was all because of a fungus-like organism. Rather than recoil in fear at the fungal kingdom, I've decided to embrace it. As I record this podcast, sitting before me on the table, I have a large yogurt container. It's quite heavy, it's 2 kilograms. It's packed, not full of yogurt, but it's packed full of paper pellets, coffee grounds, and wheat bix. And I added to that mixture a few weeks ago mushroom spawn. So this is like a white filmy material that's growing on grain. In this case, it was millet that a mushroom grower supplied to me. I put a handful of that in with the paper pellets, the water, the coffee grounds, the wheat bix, and I made sure holes were drilled in the side of the yogurt container. And then after a couple of weeks, the mushroom spawn eventually consumed the material, the food, within the container. It spread out, it became a sort of white, fibrous, willowy type organism known as mycelium, and once that filled the available space, it then produced fruit, which came out the small 1 centimetre holes I drilled in the container, and as that fruit enlarged, they became mushrooms, in this case edible mushrooms, white oyster mushrooms. These are not like the common button mushrooms you get at the supermarket. These are a lot more interesting than that, a lot more tastier gourmet mushrooms. If you bought them in a restaurant or a high-end grocer, they would be very expensive. But I have actually learned to grow them. And anyone can as well. I'm not a mushroom scientist. I simply found a course online that had a practical component face-to-face with an instructor and an online component as well. And yeah, I've learnt to create my own mushroom kits, and every 2 or 3 weeks, I harvest mushrooms from my spare room, not a patch of dirt outside. You can live in an apartment and grow these mushrooms. What I love about this process is it's rewarding. In 2021, a lot of our efforts are not rewarded. So often it doesn't matter how hard you work at something, there's no fruit from your labour. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. But there isn't a correlation between hard work and reward. Quite often it's just luck or being in the right place at the right time, no matter how skilled we are, no matter how talented we are. But since learning to grow mushrooms, I've come to appreciate that nature, which we're all part of, has its own cycles and systems that are always running in the background, even though we often don't pay them any heed. But those systems, those cycles, those processes actually invite us to participate in them. And that's what growing mushrooms is. It's using the knowledge that other people have discovered that this organism, the mycelium, likes to feed on various types of matter and break it down. I mean, mycelium is basically nature's cleanup crew. And then after it does that, it will fruit. It will reward you. So if you participate in this process that's already going on and making it part of your life, making space for it, you'll be rewarded. And providing you follow a few simple steps, you'll be able to harvest the fruits from your labour. I mean, how many things can we point to today and say, yes, I'm going to put in X amount of work and I will get out X amount of fruit? Growing mushrooms to me is also an acknowledgement that we are just part of a much larger ecosystem. In the age of COVID and other diseases, we've really developed what could be best described as biophobia. So this suspicion that the natural world is unclean and dangerous. But the fungal kingdom, it's always there. We can't close ourselves off from it. It feels empowering to do something, to learn a new skill that doesn't require me to go to the shop and buy something pre-packaged or arrange for someone else to do something for me. I think even if it's only a tiny part of our food, if we learn how to grow and manage like a tiny part of our diet, it feels like a small victory. It feels like drawing a line in the sand and saying to the modern world, which is increasingly becoming more homogenized each day, it's saying, I'm fine, thanks. I can look after myself. Thank you for listening to the Timbo Talks podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, you can find other episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or simply search for Timbo Talks in your favourite podcast app. If you want to find me on social media, I am Timbo Horan, TimboHoran on Twitter and Instagram. Until next time.